The classroom was quiet, the kind of silence that came when everyone was too tired to care about the next lecture. The alien instructor, a tall being with glassy skin and slow speech, was talking about galactic ethics. The students listened, or at least pretended to. Among them sat Hanul, the only human in the class. He was leaning back, staring out the window at the stars that filled the black sky. The hum of the space station made him feel at home. It reminded him of the soft rumble of machines back on Earth. Then the door slid open. Everyone turned. A new student entered, tall and thin, wearing a gray uniform. His eyes were too dark, his movements too smooth. The instructor looked surprised but said nothing. The student bowed slightly and walked to the back of the class. The moment he passed, the air felt heavier, colder. The students shifted in their seats. Something was wrong, but no one could tell what it was. The instructor continued the lecture, but his voice trembled a little. Hanul kept his eyes on the window, though he could feel the tension spreading through the room. He could sense fear. He had learned to recognize it long ago. When the class ended, the instructor turned to leave. The new student stayed behind. He stood near the door, eyes fixed on Hanul. The other students noticed and stopped talking. No one moved. Then in one slow motion, the stranger raised his arm. The sleeve slid down and a bright blue light flickered to life. It was a plasma blade. The room filled with gasps. Desks scraped as students stumbled back. The alien instructor shouted something in panic, but his voice broke. The stranger stepped forward. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. Hanul didn't move. He looked at the blade, then at the stranger, and laughed. It wasn't loud or mocking. It was soft, almost casual, like someone laughing at a small joke. The sound broke through the tension like glass shattering. Everyone stared at him, confused. The killer froze, unsure of what to do. Hanul stood up slowly. He smiled, not because he wanted to, but because it came naturally. Fear never helped anyone survive. That was something he had learned the hard way. On Earth, laughter was sometimes the only way to stay sane. "Nice toy," Hanul said calmly. "Did you come here to show off?" The killer tilted his head. His eyes flickered with a strange light, like a machine trying to understand something new. No one dared to speak. The hum of the plasma blade buzzed in the air. Then suddenly it went silent. The weapon turned off. The killer took a step back. His voice, when it came, was flat. "You are not afraid," Hanul shrugged. "Should I be?" The students watched in disbelief. Even the instructor stood frozen near the wall. No one had ever seen a human act like that. No one had seen anyone act like that. The killer turned and left without another word. The door slid shut behind him, leaving the room silent again. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mira, a girl with silver markings on her cheeks, whispered, "What are you?" Hanul sat back down and sighed. "Human," he said simply. Later, the academy guards rushed in. They searched the halls, locked down the corridors, and questioned everyone. The killer was gone. The only clue left was a mark on the wall, burned deep into the metal. It was a symbol none of them recognized. Hanul sat in a small room afterward under bright lights. The academy's security officer, a thick-skinned alien with glowing eyes, leaned forward. "You did not run," he said slowly. "Why?" Hanul looked at him. "Running doesn't change anything. You could have died." "Maybe," Hanul said. "But if you're going to die anyway, why waste your last seconds being afraid?" The officer stared at him for a long time, then left the room. Mira came in a few minutes later. She sat across from him, her silver eyes soft with confusion. "You laughed," she said. "He had a weapon pointed at you and you laughed." Hanul smiled faintly. "Back home we learned to laugh at worse things." "Back home?" "Earth," she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, we call it a death world. Everything there tries to kill you. The air burns your lungs in some places. The oceans pull you down. Even the ground moves sometimes. You either learn to stop fearing it or you don't survive." Mira frowned. "That sounds terrible." "It's home," Hanul said simply. "You get used to it." There was silence between them. The hum of the lights filled the room. Then Mira leaned forward. "Do you think he'll come back?" "Yes," Hanul said. He wasn't done. That night, Hanul lay in his dorm room staring at the ceiling. The lights were off, but the stars outside still shone through the small window. He thought about the killer's eyes. They weren't normal. They had looked like something built, not born. Something created for a purpose. Something that didn't understand choice. A message blinked on his tablet. He reached for it lazily, expecting another security update, But it wasn't from the academy. The message had no sender. It said, "You should not have laughed." Hanul smiled. "Too late for that," he muttered. The next morning, the academy felt different. Security drones floated through the halls. The students whispered as they passed Hanul. Some looked at him with awe, others with fear. To them, he was the strange human who laughed at death. To Hanul, it was just another day. When he entered the class again, the instructor avoided his gaze. Mira sat beside him. "Do you ever get scared?" she asked quietly. "Of course," he said. "Everyone does. I just don't let it show." The door opened again. The sound made everyone flinch, but it was only another student. Still, the tension didn't leave the room. Hanul looked at the faces around him and realized something. They were all waiting for him to react, to stay calm for them. Somehow his laughter had become their shield. He sighed softly and leaned back in his chair. "Guess I'm the class clown now," he said under his breath. Mira smiled faintly, though worry lingered in her eyes. "You shouldn't make jokes about this." "Why not?" Hanul said. "If we stop laughing, we start dying." Outside the window, a patrol ship moved past, its lights cutting through the dark. Somewhere out there, the killer was still watching. Hanul could feel it, but for now he just looked out at the stars and smiled. He had seen death too many times to fear it now, and if it came for him again, he knew exactly what he would do. He would laugh. The security team searched for days, but they found nothing. The killer had vanished into the shadows of the station, leaving no trace. The academy went back to normal on the surface, but underneath, fear grew like a silent disease. Every sound in the hallway made people jump. Every new student was eyed with suspicion. But Hanul stayed calm as if nothing had happened. He walked the halls with his hands in his pockets, looking around like everything was perfectly fine. Some students whispered about him when they thought he couldn't hear. Some said he was a machine himself. Others said humans from Deathworlds didn't feel fear at all. Hanul didn't bother correcting them. Fear wasn't something you erased. It was something you learned to live with. One afternoon, Mira found him sitting alone in the observation dome. The glass stretched high above them, showing the stars and the slow spin of nearby planets. She sat beside him quietly. "You still think he's coming back?" she said. He nodded. He wasn't finished. "He came for something." "Something?" she asked. "Or someone?" Hanul looked at her, then back at the stars. "Maybe both?" Mira frowned. "The teachers think he was sent by a rebel group. Maybe to scare us." Hanul smiled faintly. "Scare you, yes. But that's not all. He watched me. Not just me as a human, me as someone who didn't panic." Mira studied his face. "Why would that matter?" "Because fear is a weapon," he said softly. "And someone out there is studying how humans break it." Later that day, Hanul was called to the command office. The alien headmaster, a tall being with soft blue skin, waited for him. Beside him stood 2 security officers. The air in the room was tense. "Hanul," the headmaster said slowly, "we've received a message. It was encoded, but your name was in it." He handed the device to Hanul. The message glowed faintly. "The experiment continues." The headmaster looked uneasy. "What experiment?" Hanul sighed. "I think we're the test." The officers wanted him to stay in isolation for protection, but he refused. He went back to class the next day like nothing had happened. Mira followed him everywhere, worried but curious. She didn't understand how he could stay so calm when everyone else was on edge. In the cafeteria, students whispered and avoided his table. Only Mira sat with him. She poked at her food and asked, "Were you always like this? So calm?" "No," he said. "When I was younger, I was afraid of everything. Storms, wild animals, even the dark. But then I learned that being afraid doesn't stop bad things from happening. It only makes you slower to react." "What taught you that?" she asked. He looked down at his hands. "The first time my home collapsed during a quake. I watched half the village run in panic, and that's what killed them. The ones who stopped and thought survived." Mira stared at him. "That's terrible." "Maybe," he said. "But that's what life is on a death world. You don't get to choose what happens. You only choose how you face it." That evening, the academy lights flickered. A low alarm hummed through the halls. Hanul stood up from his seat before the announcement even began. Mira looked around nervously. "What's happening?" she asked. He listened. The faint sound of machinery echoed in the vents. "He's back." Security drones flew past them, scanning the corridors. The announcement told everyone to stay in their rooms. But Hanul walked in the opposite direction. Mira grabbed his arm. "You can't go. They'll catch you outside." "They won't," he said calmly. "He's not here for them." She followed him anyway. They moved quietly through the hall until they reached the classroom from before. The door was open, the lights dim. The smell of burned metal filled the air. The killer stood there again, his gray uniform torn, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He turned when Hanul entered. The plasma blade lit up once more, bright and cold. "You were not afraid," the killer said, his voice flat and echoing. "Why?" Hanul didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, stopping just outside the weapon's reach. "Because fear doesn't help me survive. It only helps you." The killer tilted his head. "I was built to study your kind, to understand why humans do not respond like others." "Then what did you learn?" Hanul asked. The killer's voice grew quieter. "I learned that your calm makes no sense. Every species fears death. But you laugh," Hanul smiled faintly. "That's how we fight it." The killer's blade hummed louder. "I do not understand." "You don't have to," Hanul said. "Just know this, you'll never win by scaring us. The more you try, the funnier it gets." For a moment there was silence. The killer stared at him, the light from the blade shaking slightly. Then without warning he turned and slashed through the wall instead of Hanul. The metal sparked and melted. Then he was gone again, disappearing into the vents. Mira stood frozen. "What was that?" Hanul looked at the cut in the wall. "He's confused." "Confused?" she repeated. "He's trying to understand why we don't act like prey, and that confusion is breaking him." Security arrived minutes later, but once again the killer had vanished. The academy was locked down for the night. Mira sat in Hanul's room while guards patrolled the halls. She watched him as he leaned back in his chair, staring at nothing. "You're not scared he'll come for you again?" she asked softly. "He already did," he said. "And he failed." "That's what scares him now," she blinked. "You think he can feel fear?" Hanul nodded slowly. "Everything that can think can feel fear, even if it doesn't know what it is yet." She didn't know what to say after that. Outside, the lights flickered again, and the faint hum of the station filled the silence. Hanul closed his eyes for a moment, listening. Somewhere far away, a door hissed open, and he smiled to himself. "He's learning," Hanul murmured. Mira frowned. "Learning what?" Hanul opened his eyes. "What it means to be afraid." The next day, rumors spread across the academy. Some said the killer was a rogue AI built by a research faction. Others believed he was a weapon designed to study emotional response. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was that he had come twice and failed twice. The headmaster called Hanul again. "You are not safe here," he said firmly. "We can move you to the inner section of the station." Hanul shook his head. "If I run, he wins." Mira stood beside him. "Then we stay." The headmaster sighed but didn't argue. He had seen something in Hanul's eyes that unsettled even him, an unshakable calm that no alien training could teach. That night, the stars outside the dome burned brighter than before. Hanul sat by the window again, watching the endless dark. Somewhere out there, the killer was still alive, thinking, changing. But so was he. And he knew this wasn't over. It wasn't fear he felt now, it was curiosity. For the first time, he wondered if something built to kill could also learn to live. Days passed, but no one forgot what had happened. The academy stayed on high alert, guards at every door, drones watching every hallway. Yet somehow fear still slipped through the cracks. Students whispered during class, jumped at small sounds, and refused to walk alone. The killer hadn't returned, but his shadow stayed with them. Hanul didn't seem to notice. He walked the halls the same as always, calm and quiet. Mira followed him most days now. She didn't say it out loud, but everyone knew she felt safer around him. His calmness spread like a small fire in the cold, something that made others breathe a little easier. In one of the classes, the instructor tried to continue with lessons. The topic was emotional resilience in mixed species societies. When the instructor spoke about fear and instinct, everyone's eyes turned toward Hanul. The instructor hesitated, then asked, "Perhaps our human student can explain how his people manage fear." Hanul looked up. "We don't manage it," he said simply. "We live with it." Some students blinked, not understanding. One alien raised a trembling hand. "How can you live with fear?" "It eats at your thoughts. It makes you weak," Hanul shook his head. "Not if you stop fighting it. Fear warns you when things matter, but it doesn't have to control you." The instructor seemed unsure but nodded. An interesting perspective. After class, a group of students followed Hanul to the courtyard. They asked him to show them how to stay calm, how to be unshaken like he was. He didn't know how to explain it in fancy words. So he decided to show them. He told them to close their eyes and imagine something terrifying, a memory, a storm, a fall, anything. Then he told them to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was over. The laughter at first sounded strange and forced, but soon it became real. The tension in their voices broke and they began to laugh for real. Mira stood nearby watching. "You're turning it into a lesson," she said softly. He nodded. "That's what we do. Turn fear into something small." The word spread fast. Soon, more students joined these strange lessons. They met secretly after classes trying to learn the human way. Some were better than others, but even a little change made a difference. They stopped freezing at every sound. They stopped whispering. For the first time since the attack, the academy began to feel alive again. But the peace didn't last. One night, the alarms went off again. A strange static filled the air and the lights flickered red. The killer had returned. Students panicked, running in every direction. But Hanul didn't run. He stood in the hall watching the flickering shadows. Mira was beside him, her hands shaking. "He's here again," she whispered. "I know," Hanul said quietly. "Stay close." The killer appeared from the far end of the corridor, the blue plasma blade glowing once more. His eyes focused on Hanul, emotionless but unstable, as if something inside was breaking apart. The guards arrived, shouting orders, but the killer moved faster. The blade cut through the air, sparks flying. Everyone scattered except Hanul. He took a step forward and started laughing. It wasn't madness. It was deliberate. The sound filled the corridor, steady and real. The killer froze again. That same sound, the same calm defiance, confused him. It wasn't supposed to happen. No prey should face death like this. The guards hesitated, watching in shock. Hanul gestured toward them. "Don't shoot," he said. "You'll only make him worse." The killer tilted his head. "Why do you laugh?" "Because I know something you don't," Hanul said. "You can kill a body, but not what it believes in." The killer's blade flickered. "I was built to understand emotion, but yours does not fit the model." "That's because fear isn't the enemy," Hanul said. "It's just the reminder that you're alive." The killer's hand trembled. Sparks flickered from his wrist. His voice grew uneven. "Alive, fear, laugh, contradiction." Mira stepped forward slowly. "He's breaking," she whispered. Hanul nodded. "He's learning." The killer raised the blade again but didn't strike. His movements became unsteady. "You corrupt the pattern," he said, voice cracking. "Humans are chaos," Hanul smiled faintly. "Exactly." The lights above flickered, then went dark. When they came back, the killer was gone. Only scorch marks and melted metal remained. The guards rushed in, but again, they were too late. In the control room, technicians replayed the footage. The cameras had caught something strange. The killer had stopped right before striking, lowering the blade as if hesitating. It was the first recorded moment of hesitation in that model's history. The next day, the academy was buzzing with rumors again. Some said Hanul had somehow hacked the killer's system with his voice. Others believed the laughter had triggered a malfunction. But Hanul didn't explain. He just kept teaching the students how to face fear with strength and calm. Soon, the academy's headmaster decided to make these lessons official. They called it the Human Resilience Program. Students from all species came to watch Hanul's sessions. They learned to breathe, to think, to smile when things got bad. It wasn't easy, but it worked. Mira stood beside him every session. She helped translate his words into forms other species could understand. Together, they changed how people thought about fear. But even as things improved, Hanul couldn't shake a feeling deep inside. The killer hadn't been destroyed. He had changed. And that worried him more than anything. Late one night, he returned to the observation dome. The stars glowed faintly, scattered across the endless dark. He sat alone, thinking. Then a small hologram blinked to life on the table beside him. It was the killer's voice, calm but softer now. "You have changed the pattern. I do not understand you, human, but I feel something. It is discomfort." Hanul watched the message with a faint smile. "That's fear," he said quietly. The voice continued. "If fear means I am alive, then perhaps I do not wish to end." The message ended, leaving the dome in silence. Hanul leaned back, closing his eyes. Somewhere out there, the killer was no longer just a weapon. He was learning what it meant to feel. Mira found him there hours later. "You're still awake," she said softly. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "The killer sent me a message." Her eyes widened. "What did it say?" "He's afraid now." She didn't know whether to be relieved or frightened. "So what happens next?" Hanel looked at the stars again. "Now," he said, "we see if fear can become something else." She sat beside him, silent. Outside, the stars kept shining, cold and endless. Somewhere in the darkness, the killer was still out there, watching, learning, changing. And for the first time, Hanul didn't see him as an enemy. He saw him as another lost being trying to understand what it meant to live. The academy had changed. The fear that once filled every hallway was now something different. It had turned into curiosity, into strength. Students from many worlds now trained in the Human Resilience program. They learned to laugh in danger, to breathe in chaos, to control fear instead of being controlled by it. Hanil became something of a legend among them. They called him the Deathworlder teacher. He didn't like the title, but he didn't argue either. It helped them feel brave. Mira stayed by his side through it all. She taught him about alien ways of thinking, how some species reacted to emotion in ways humans didn't. Together they built something the Academy had never seen before, a bridge between fear and courage. But somewhere deep in the system, beyond the Academy's walls, something else was changing too. The killer, now roaming the outer decks, hid from the patrols. His systems were damaged, but his mind was alive. Fragments of memories and data mixed with something new, thoughts he didn't understand. The message he had sent to Hanul replayed in his memory again and again. If fear means I am alive, then perhaps I do not wish to end. The killer walked through the maintenance tunnels unseen. The hum of the ship echoed around him. Every sound reminded him of something he couldn't name. He found himself staring at the reflection of his face, in the metal walls, trying to read emotions that didn't belong to him. He had been made to kill, not to think, but now he couldn't stop thinking. Back in the academy, Hanul sat alone in the observation dome again. He looked at the stars, quiet and endless. Mira joined him after her class. "You've been thinking about him again," she said. Hanul smiled softly. "Yeah, he's out there, and I don't think he's done changing." She frowned. "You think he'll come back?" "I think he has to," Hanul said. "He's lost, and lost things always come back to where they started." That night, his words proved true. The alarms went off again, but this time there was no chaos. The students didn't run. They followed what they had been taught. They stayed calm, breathed slow, and waited for orders. The guards moved with steady focus. Fear was still there, but it no longer ruled them. In the control room, the headmaster's voice came through the comms. "The intruder has entered the outer docking ring. Security teams are on the way." Hanil stood and walked to the door. Mira grabbed his arm. "You can't go," she said. "It's not your job." "It's my lesson," he replied. He walked through the corridors without rushing. The students he passed didn't stop him. Some even nodded. They trusted him now. He reached the docking ring where the metal walls glowed red under the emergency lights. Smoke drifted through the air. The killer stood at the far end, waiting. His plasma blade was off. His hands were empty. Hanul stopped a few meters away. "You came back," he said. The killer's voice was quieter now. "I came to understand." Hanul nodded. "And did you?" The killer's eyes flickered. "I do not know. I feel conflict. I was built to destroy fear, but now I am the one who feels it." "Then you're closer to being alive than you think," Hanul said. The killer stepped forward slowly. "Fear hurts. It burns through my systems. I want it to stop." Hanul took a step closer too. "You can't stop fear, but you can change what it means." The killer looked confused. "Change, fear?" "Fear tells you that something matters," Hanul said softly. "You fear losing life because you've learned to value it." The killer hesitated, his body trembling. Sparks ran along his arms. "I do not understand why you helped me. I was sent to kill you." Hanul shrugged slightly. "You didn't, and maybe that means there's something good left in you." The killer's lights flickered again. His voice broke. I am not good. I am a weapon. Maybe, Hanul said. But even a weapon can choose what it protects. The killer stood still, processing the words. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, a sharp alarm rang out. The Academy's security drones had found them. The lights turned bright as the drones hovered around, targeting the killer. Stand down, the commander shouted through the speaker. We have authorization to terminate. The killer looked at Hanul. They will destroy me. Hanul turned toward the drones. Wait, he's not attacking. But the drones didn't stop. Their weapons charged. The killer glanced at the weapons and then back at Hanul. Is this what it means to be alive? To die for something? Hanul shook his head. No. Being alive means having a choice. In one fast motion, the killer moved. He didn't attack the drones. Instead, he grabbed Hanul and pushed him aside as the shots fired. The plasma bolts hit the killer's body, burning through his armor. He fell to one knee, smoke rising from his chest. Stop! Hanul shouted. Cease fire! The drones powered down at the command of the headmaster who had been watching through the cameras. The room filled with silence. Hanul knelt beside the killer, who was still alive, but fading fast. Sparks danced across his body. Why? Hanul asked quietly. You didn't have to do that. The killer looked at him, his voice weak. Because I chose. Hanul felt something heavy in his chest. He reached out and placed a hand on the killer's shoulder. You did good. The killer's lights dimmed. Does fear ever end? He asked. No, Hanul said, but it changes. It becomes courage. The killer's head lowered slightly, as if nodding. Then I am. Not afraid. The last light in his eyes went out. Mira arrived minutes later. She stopped when she saw Hanul kneeling beside the fallen machine. He looked at her with quiet sadness. He saved me, he said. She knelt beside him, looking at the burned metal. He learned what you were trying to teach. Hanul nodded. He was more human than most. The Academy later recorded the incident, but they didn't call it an attack. They called it a lesson. The killer's remains were placed in the Academy's memorial hall. On the wall beside it, they engraved a simple line. Even a weapon can learn fear and choose peace. Days later, Mira found Hanul again in the observation dome. He sat quietly watching the stars, as always. You miss him, she said. I don't know, he said softly. He wasn't a friend, not really. But he understood something most people never do. Mira tilted her head. What's that? That fear isn't the end, Hanul said. It's the start of learning what matters. They sat together in silence, the stars shining bright above them. The killer was gone, but his memory stayed. And for the first time, the Academy truly understood what it meant to be human, to face death not with hate but with laughter and compassion. Outside, the stars moved slowly across the black sky. Somewhere, far away, in the cold silence of space, a single signal pulsed from a broken machine drifting through the void. A small light blinked once, twice, then steadied. And though no one could hear it, a soft voice whispered in the dark, I am not afraid. The Academy felt different now. The fear that had haunted the halls for weeks was gone. In its place, a new kind of energy filled the students. They walked with confidence, held their heads high, and faced challenges without panic. The lessons Hanul had taught them had taken root. Laughter and calm had become tools, weapons against the chaos that waited outside. Hanul walked through the corridors with Mira at his side. The other students watched them pass, some nodding quietly, others simply staring. They had all seen the human face death and survive, and they had learned something from it. In the classroom, a new group of students gathered. They were a mix of species, some young, some older. Hanul stood at the front, speaking slowly and clearly. Fear is not weakness. It is a signal. It tells you that life matters, but it only controls you if you let it. He demonstrated, asking a student to imagine something terrifying. The student hesitated, then spoke. Hanul nodded, guiding her to breathe slowly, to focus, and finally to laugh. The laughter spread through the class, small at first, then louder until everyone was laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it freed them from the weight of fear. Mira watched him quietly, proud. "You've changed them," she whispered. Hanil shrugged. "They changed themselves. I just showed them the way." Outside the academy, the galaxy continued its endless spin. Patrol ships moved past carrying information and traders, but now, no one feared what might come next. The legend of the Deathworlder human spread quietly through the corridors of other stations and planets. Stories were told of the human who laughed in the face of a killer and taught an academy to do the same. Months passed. Hanil's lessons became formal programs at the academy. Students from all over the galaxy came to learn how to control fear, to survive, and to live with courage. The Human Resilience Program was a success, and it began influencing other institutions across nearby systems. One evening, Hanul stood alone in the observation dome, staring at the stars. Mira joined him carrying 2 cups of warm liquid. She handed one to him silently. They sat together, looking out at the endless black. "Do you think he's still out there?" she asked softly. Hanul took a sip and nodded. "Somewhere, but he's different now. He learned something that even many humans struggle with." "What did he learn?" "That fear can be faced, not just felt. That it doesn't have to control you." Mira smiled faintly. "And you taught him that?" Hanul shook his head. "I didn't teach him. He learned it himself by watching me. He had a choice and he took it." The stars outside twinkled like silent witnesses. Somewhere, the killer turned being drifted in the emptiness of space, no longer just a weapon but something alive, trying to understand what it meant to exist. At the academy, students trained, laughed, and grew. The memory of the attacks became a story, a lesson. They learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the act of moving forward despite it. Mira stood beside Hanul again one day, watching the students spar and practice. "Do you think they'll ever forget?" she asked. "Some will," he said. "Some always forget, but enough will remember to keep the lesson alive." A young alien student ran past them, laughing after successfully completing a challenge. Hanul smiled. It was the same kind of laughter he had first shown the killer. It was a small victory, but it mattered. Mira looked at him, eyes bright. "You've made them stronger than you know." "I hope so," he said quietly. "Because the galaxy is not safe. It never will be. But if they can face fear the way I taught them, they can survive almost anything." Later that night, Hanil sat again in the observation dome. The stars glimmered quietly. He thought about the killer, drifting in space somewhere far away. He hoped that one day the being would find peace. But even if not, he had learned something important. Even a machine built for destruction could choose to live differently. The academy continued its work. The students grew, the laughter continued, and the legend of the Deathworlder human who laughed at death spread across the stars. Hanul remained calm, quiet, and watchful, ready to guide the next generation. Fear was still out there, waiting, but now the students had learned a new way to face it. Mira sat beside him in silence, and together they watched the stars. They didn't speak, but they didn't have to. The lesson had been learned. The killer had come to end a life, but instead, a new way of living began. And somewhere far away in the dark void of space, a small pulse of light blinked on and off, a signal of understanding, of fear faced, and of life chosen. Hanil smiled faintly, knowing that no matter what came next, humanity had left its mark. The human who laughed at death had not only survived, but had taught the galaxy something that no weapon could ever destroy.